Once upon a lifetime, the best of all possible worlds flew into my window and left a secret bag full of treasured gifts to nourish my dream. This is a film about you as much as it is about the artists who will appear before you. A film that gives passage to your creative inheritance. An inheritance that sits quietly waiting, ready to be claimed. We will meet artists who place art at the center of their lives, who in their own way are outliers, living creatively, exploring new ways of being in our world. Art in the service of spirit. Art in the service of transformation. Art as an energetic transmission. There are power spots, energy sources, catalysts, available to detonate creativity, inspire process, and dissolve limitations. These centers may be embodied in places, people, or ideas. They do not exist independently from you. They find form by your investment in them. We welcome you as one of us.
Je suis un point de conscience dans l'univers infini. C'est tout ce que je suis. Well, I'll try it in English as well. I'm a point of consciousness in the infinite universe. That's what I am.
But I know that I must write. I want to write. It just flows out from where? I don't know. It's cosmic vibrations. It's opaque. It's something that we cannot ever describe. It's something that is so intense. It's something so marvelous. Something so unique. No, it's more than that. It's the epitome. It's something that is beyond us, the greater spirit.
I think if I may add a word to what you're saying, I think it's you defining in a way the trouble that I sense about today's art, where artists want first and foremost to sell themselves, so they're obsessed by the idea of an audience, of customers, not an audience, but customers, and that's the problem with today's art. There are exceptions. There have
to be exceptions.
But
that's the spirit.
Yeah, but the general.
If there's no exceptions, then what we're talking about is nonsense, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact is that this opaqueness is active. It's got its own life force.
Yeah. And it's always
been the same.
Very fine and subtle as well. I mean, you may have people selling themselves who still are true artists. I mean, we must be very careful about generalizations. Yeah. So it's we're treading on a very unstable ground.
Yes. Tread softly, for you walk on my dream. Tread softly. The thing is that we do feel that we have a mission. We want the art to give some message somewhere. We want it to be recognized, even though we don't want to push it or to be on everybody's lips. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a we do like to think that it's being protected.
I mean, the ego is our enemy, intimate enemy.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of the whole problem of art, which is inner purification, and becoming becoming a pure medium for superior energies, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, and there's no end. There's no end to that work. It's very demanding, sometimes painful, and sometimes despairing, in fact, you know?
Yeah.
But I think this is the true way, you know? The true way.
When I was first looking for a name, I had a dream that said, you are incognito. Or he did say incognito, you are opaque, you are invisible. That was the word, you're invisible. I woke up and I thought, well, I can't really go around calling myself invisible. So I sort of said, well, incognito. Yeah, that's it, I'm incognito, because actually I am a nobody. And when you're a nobody, you're incognito. So I changed incognito into an anagram, and it ended up being ocni-oting. So that's, you know, the anagram of incognito. That was the first idea of this opaqueness that came in, this idea of being incognito in a world. And it was lovely because it gave me the freedom to be incognito, if you like. Probably always have been. But it put some sort of a form into myself. And I sort of thought, well, it just doesn't matter to be published or to be famous. I always believe that I'm at the right moment, at the right time, doing what I'm supposed to do. And I think that a lot of people perhaps are. So that would, you know, some people don't like the idea that we are programmed, you know, kind of. But why not? I think everything is mathematical. I think maybe everything is just so beautifully timed. Why not? We know little, we know nothing. I would say we know nothing. Let's face it, the only thing we have are our senses and our feeling. I disagree with people who say that the senses aren't important, they're vital. I mean, everything that we have is inside ourselves in a way, isn't it? I don't think it's an ongoing process as such as an inspiration that comes in waves. I can't say it is constant because it's always there. What I mean is that this idea that I'm transforming something that is being pushed, or some energy, like some sort of a magnet that is pushing behind me to enter, if you like, the world that they want or it wants. I don't know, it could be a they, I mean, or a it or a she or I don't know. The greater spirit is actually the word the Red Indian used for God. You had Dew, D-U-W in Welsh, God. But God is just a name given to something, like we give leaves and trees. The trees don't call themselves trees, I'm sure. This transmission of the greater spirit in every human being, and maybe in every form of life, is something that comes in waves. It adapts itself to the situation you find yourself in at the moment. So if you're in a group of people where you find vibrations that seem to be in harmony with perhaps your spirit or just the global spirit, it seems that it automatically seems easier for me to speak, to transform my ideas into almost an idea that is cosmic.
I would say the job of art is to destabilize, you know, to deprive people of their certainties. And that's the job of art, you know. When, you know, a poem, a good play, when people listen to that, when they've been attentive and receptive enough, when they leave the house, they go back home. I mean, they are changing, in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, this idea of the artist as a medium between the absolute and the relative world of humanity,
Yeah.
was essential in ancient civilizations. Today it's lost. The memory of memories, the consciousness of consciousnesses, a thread of gold from the unnameable, finger of gold, drawing, carving, inscribing in the stone of eternity the hieroglyphs of an unknown, familiar language. A code of heart and soul, the heart of hearts, the soul of soul. Throbbing form of form, resounding note of notes, music of musics, architecture of architectures, spine of universal balance, rule of universal harmony, light and peace concealed by war and obscurity, night of love for love of light, suffering of all that suffers for joy and peace universally longed for. Poet, champion of the unborn, smothered light of humankind and universal love creation.
No, so the idea of the talisman was something in an age where people didn't have a lot of material possessions. It was something that literally you carried on your person. That was a sacred object. And the idea...
It's very, very... If you go to Wales, my grandmother had a rabbit's paw in her pocket. Really with all the nails and... No, her hair. The hair's paw. So this was her talisman. So, it's still alive today.
It's still alive today. It's true. But I think that we put... we're overrun with material forms of memory.
Yeah, that's true.
And they tend, these little second brains in our pockets here tend to displace our own capacity for memory. And so what that challenges us to do is to return to something truly self-sufficient and independent, our own minds, our own capacities to keep these talismans that can never turn off, that can never fail, that can never need some software upgrade, that will always be with us. And so from third grade, when I first memorized Yeats and Irish Airman Foresees His Death. Should I do a little bit?
Yes,
just because it's fresh in my mind. I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere beyond the clouds above. Those that I fight, I do not hate. Those that I guard, I do not love. My country is Kill Tartan Cross. My countrymen, Kill Tartans poor. No likely end could bring them loss or leave them better than before. No sense of duty bade me fight. No famous men nor cheering crowds. A lonely impulse of delight drawn to that tumult in the clouds. I gathered all, brought all to mind. The years ahead seemed waste of breath. A waste of breath the years behind in balance with this life, this death. First poem I ever memorized, age 9. It'll never leave me. I'll have it till the day I die. That's a talisman. That's something that never goes away. Yeah, so there's a great scene or great passage in the Phaedrus, one of Plato's dialogues, where the whole dialogue is this extended flirtation between Socrates and this young boy named Phaedrus under a tree on a day not unlike this one. It was very, very hot, and they went walking in the countryside in Athens, and they ended up talking about love poetry and then rhetoric, and then writing. And Socrates tells this story. Now, when we tell stories about Plato, what they did in the 4th century BC was they would tell stories about the Egyptians. The Egyptians were to Socrates what Socrates is to us. Okay, so he told this myth, and this I promise this is to your question. I promise. Stick with me for. for a moment. So he says that, so the god Thoth, who was the great inventor god of the Egyptian gods, he comes to Horus, to the chief god, and he says, I've made this great invention. And it's a pharmacon. He uses the word pharmacon, which when we get our word pharmaceutical. So it's this magical medicine, and I call it writing. And it will be a way for us to always remember things, and it will be this incredible aid to human memory.
Yes.
Right? And here's how it works. And you write these little marks in a hieroglyphs on the thing, and this will help us our memory. And Horus, this is Socrates telling the story, and Horus answers, and he says, "Now, like all inventors, Thoth, you are not the best judge of your own invention.
Yeah.
And in fact, what you've invented is not an aid for memory. What you've invented is the destruction and the end of human memory. That when people use this device called writing, they will cease to remember, and they will put this instead on the page.
Yeah.
And from the 3rd century BC, when writing, was taking hold of Greek culture, moving from an oral culture to a culture of texts, to today is one long story of the passage of human memory into the preservation of memory in writing, and ultimately in ones and zeros and on iPhones in our pockets. And what the questions that Plato raises are questions we've never answered about what it means to hold memory on a device in your pocket or on the internet versus having something really, truly in your mind. And I don't want to go back to the 3rd century BC. I like being able to, if I can't remember that Yeats poem, to call it up in my pocket and be able to read it in front of a Sappho or Shakespeare. But at the same time, it comes at a price.
Now, what I'd like to do is read Panmelys' poem from 1995. She gave me this poem this morning before I went away, and she told me read this on the metro. And when I read this on the metro, I was amazed, because this is exactly where I am.
The stage at that where you are.
Yeah.
And I recognized that immediately. We went to a restaurant last night together, and when he was speaking about his evolution, if you like, this feeling that he has inside himself at the moment, I said, well, I've already reached that stage quite a while back. So that's why I gave you the poem.
Yeah. Life's strange pause. This change from flesh to spirit pure is all life's end, shared by everything that ever lived. The sun and moon and stars, the sea, there witness our long tale of human fragile stay on earth, where we are dumb before our birth, and dumbly go beyond this door of strangest memory that stores our dreams. This change from flesh to spirit pure, which seems but loss, is not whatever can be shown, though it lives on and goes to its own history of human story, long or short, to there become sure energy around a mystery that moves within our veins and sap and breathes unmoved. This change from flesh to spirit pure cannot replace the face, the look, the sound that spoke, returns to bring us hope where we feel vibrations flash inside our minds and trace again the smile and tear and try to reach to say some word we left unsaid to them. Lost gesture. This change from flesh to spirit pure is our long song where we are powerless before this aching pain that never stops, stays around, scans in vain this death that never really was. For waves absorb and there become beneath another span of time of which we know no cause. Life's strange pause. I make a distinction between, well, that's my terminology, yeah? It's between singing and writing. To me, singing is receiving this kind of demonic, inspiration. You don't know where it comes from, but
I love singing.
it's just, that's, to me, that's singing. For example, a poem by Walt Whitman, I sing the body electric, and when you read the rest of the poem, I mean,
I sing the body electric was his at the Sorbonne today. Was his lecture.
It doesn't sound like something that has been filtered by the intellect, whatever. It sounds like a kind of music which has slipped into the words, in some mysterious way. It's not something intellectual. It's not something. I would even say it's not something conscious. So
it's opaque.
That's opaque. That's mysterious.
It's unconscious.
It's
deep
as what Whitman himself says. He says it balks account. I like the way he says it. It balks account.
I had the great fortune of sitting when I was 20 years old, and the internet was brand new. I mean, I'm not giving away too much about my age here, which my gray hair has already done for me. But my sophomore year in college, I took my first Shakespeare seminar with a man named Harold Bloom, who is a great Shakespearean scholar, a great literary critic, and by far the most capacious memorizer of poetry and prose that I've ever encountered in my life. And so this is a man who could not only give you lines upon lines of King Lear, entire soliloquies, entire scenes, and then to quote the paragraph of Samuel Johnson or Hazlitt that was the commentary, and then the commentary upon the commentary, and then his anecdote about when he told that line about Cleopatra to Harold Wilson or Norman Mailer at the party in Manhattan, and all of these things were at his command, at his instant command, and just to think that was possible in the year 2001, that a human being could have that treasury of lines and poems.
Like the Druids. It's Druidic.
He's Druidic. And I remember reading so the Hindu epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. The Mahabharata, right? The great Hindu spiritual epic of these two great families, like the Montagues and Capulets, who clash, and then the gods intervene on their sides, and it's something that in some ways we recognize from Homer, but this one epic is longer, is 3 times as long as the Odyssey and the Iliad put together, and until almost today, there are still bards, Hindu bards, in India who can recite the whole thing. I mean, to imagine that there are memories that hold that many mansions, that many shelves of books that you can bring with you. No one can ever take that away. And I have become fascinated in my recent life with Stoic philosophy. And Epictetus, the 2nd century Greek philosopher, who was a slave, who then became a great master. Epictetus, who was a teacher of Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and philosopher. And he said, the one thing you can control in the whole universe is your own reaction, your own rationality, your own reason and thought. That everything else, every item, every book, every item of clothing, every intimate friend and family member, the universe could take that person away or take that thing away, and what you hold with you is only your own mind. And so develop your logos, your sense of reason. And so that's all of a piece with this idea that the words we carry with us, the poems we carry with us, is the only thing in life that's truly ours. The first time that I ever saw Panmelys, she was incanting Fern Hill at the memorial service for George Whitman at Père Lachaise. And you have to picture this chapel, this dome, full of people, including this New Orleans jazz trio, and there were exactly 3 speakers: Jeanette Winterson, the novelist, George's daughter Sylvia, and this beautiful woman here. And she brought Fern Hill to operatic heights that I never heard Dylan Thomas recited that way before. And
that was for George, you see.
It was for George, and I'll never forget it. And so she brought Puccini into Dylan Thomas. You really did, and it was delightful. And so so Panmelys sets the standard of musical poetry that I try to uphold.
Recognition. And I am lonely for that kiss that never came. And I am sorry for that wish that never saw. And I am only in this way whatever was. And I am happy for this day because it is. And I am worry as I sight a mother's tear. And I am hurry as I write a nation's fear. And I am wonder as I hold a newborn child. And I am thunder when I hear it was abused. And I am sorrow when I'm told it died from cold. And I am horror as I fight away from home. And I am knowing all of strife, refrain to die. And I am slowly come of age in life's long rage. Imprints of the mind. In all pretense lies self-defense, to be, conspiring to become, self-made free, while trying to disguise those parts, not wishing or inspiring to impart true heart's measure to satisfy pleasure, what others imagine they see of other. It's life's convinced reality against mind's knowledge of identity, which pledges lives lived before this day, imprints inscribed which genes display poetic truths of immortality. Though crowds will shout, stone such heresy. Spirit but a solid block, unknown, where greater spirit wisdom moves alone. Mad Hatter's Tea Party has become the live poets' circle. So the tea party is something that actually was started by Sylvia Beach. And she had a very, well, of course, a different kind of tea party, a very almost like a Louis XIV kind of thing, I imagine, like a courtesan giving her with the special invitations. It wasn't an open house. I can't say cultivated because that would mean that maybe ours are not, because ours are quite cultivated. All, people that come to bookshops all know a bit about books. They're all usually cultured, or a bit of culture. And then Sylvia, in 2011, when George died, she had them put onto the second floor, and it was made public. It's a different tea party every week, but some of them are amazing. It's like, again, you talk about the greater spirit. Middle Ages. This is the Middle Ages. I swear, it's fabulous. So they're opening all this up. She's doing marvelous work, Sylvia. More and more, opening up things, big surprises. Little round walls and all kinds of mysteries. Somebody put that chair here, Madame. And that's Kitty's marvelous work. Yeah, because they were the whole last night. It's very crowded.
There were only French people there. It was terrifying.
The cushion's behind you. Enjoying yourself?
Yes, it's wonderful.
You can all come in. It's a free-for-all. It's public. You can even move Kitty the cat. You write in my book.
She's adorable.
Everybody has to write in my book. It goes to the archives, so you can move the book.
Link arms, children, in the bright dark of evening, in the overspilling of the music and the rain. Be in peace and joyful, wander brilliant through these gilded arcs of night. This is a toast for all our held-out truths, for all the kindness offered at late hours. This is a toast for the goodness of friends. Did you know my heart is full? It has corridors of loneliness in these empty mirror halls. It finds ways of sorrow and of shattering. But did you know my heart is full? I am so full of life and living. This is a toast to the rainfall on my broken shoulders, to the hands that hold each other open and aloft. What midnight things could be greater than this, than returning through familiar streets alive with the golden dust that precedes morning, alive with all of this? and my body aches and aches and aches, and yet this is a toast to these glorious lights, and this is a toast to grieving, and this is a toast to all of us.
What was the title of that one?
It doesn't have one yet.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's all right. Dylan Thomas never put titles on them. They'll add them on for you anyway, Lucy. Usually first lines. They take the first line.
In the interim, that place that is both, half of a day and half of a night, I think of you from my window, when light pools at the bottom of the sky, and I feel milky blue. Inside, I hang up the air from the four corners of my ceiling, and it settles down upon me, thin layers and layers of stillness. I wonder if you can see the sky. You're probably asleep, but in my mind I like to think that you're sat out, fingers knotted in the evening grass. Your sky is different to mine, all rich and imposing, so dark it smothers you. I think that would be your favourite type of sky.
From the preface. This is not mine, it's Lewis Carroll. This is the preface to...
Every word weighs a ton.
Yeah.
That's my party piece. Every word weighs a ton. So I want to hear every word. So take your time.
This is the preface to Through the Looking Glass.
Oh.
I don't think many people just skip it over it and go straight to the book, which is great. But there's a few lines that have really stuck in my mind.
Good.
So it goes like this. Child of the pure unclouded brow and dreaming and smiling eyes of wonder, though time be fleet and I and thou are half a life asunder, thy loving smile will surely hail the love gift of this fairy tale.
Oh, beautiful.
Wait, no, it's not done. I have not.
More. Good.
I have not seen thy sunny face, nor heard thy silver laughter. No thought of me shall have a place in thy young lives hereafter. Enough that now thou wilt not fail to listen to my fairy tale. A tale begun in other days when summer suns were glowing. A simple chime that served in time the rhythm of our rowing, whose echoes live in memory yet, though envious years would cry, forget. Come, hearken then, ere voice of dread with bitter tidings laden shall summon to unwelcome bed a melancholy maiden. We are but older children dear, who fret to find our bedtime near. Without the frost wind, the blinding snow, without the storm wind's moody madness, within the firelight's ruddy glow and childhood's nest of gladness, these magic words will hold thee fast. Thou shalt not heed the raving blast. And though the shadow of a sigh may tremble through this story of happy summer days gone by and vanished summer glory, it shall not touch with breath of bale the pleasance of this fairy tale.
Bravo. That's lovely. I love people with this capacity to, hold in their minds these marvelous. And we haven't lost it. We're going to do it more and more. Well, poetry is music, actually. But I do think that music is, of all the 5 or maybe even more disciplines, music is number 1. So we do need some songs. Okay.
So I sang Fly Me to the Moon. I've sang it every time I've come, somehow. So everyone is more than welcome to sing with me.
Yeah, we can all sing with her if we know it.
Yes.
But nobody ever
which
does.
most people do. Fly Me to the Moon. Frank Sinatra.
Yes.
Okay. Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you.
But when you lie dead, no one will notice later or feel sad, because you gathered no sprays from the roses of the Perean muses. Once lost in Hades' hall, you'll be homeless and invisible, another shadow flittering back and forth, with shadows of no worth.
That's good.
But can you read some?
Well, you read very well. Oh, it's lovely. Come close, your precious graces and musics. Come close, you precious graces and music with beautiful tresses. Come close, you. Oh, I love it. Precious graces and music with beautiful tresses. Here is the reason it is wrong to play a funeral song in the musician's house. It simply would not be decorous. Decorous, sorry. Decorous, that's
English.
Decorous, yeah. It simply would not be decorous. God crafted product of the tortoise shell. Come to me, Lears, be voluble. You know that they said that she invented a certain kind of lyre herself. And she sang all her poems. She was a singer. She never read her poems. Did you know that?
Yeah.
She sang. She had the most marvelous voice.
Voices in the dark are strangers, without reason or direction, only substance, and the heightened timbre of the dark makes slant rhyme out of the rustles of invisible living, the scraped thin breathings of the sea and those below. All things go. There is only the silent black of blindness, and the interruption of bright gold lights like dreams poured into small globes, thoughts of heaven held dear by the tethers of soil and the waves. The holy constructions of men are irreverent, great brass skeletons with boldness enough to hold the sky. The holy constructions of men are both love songs and hymns. There is no choral exultation in this stillness. There is no way to measure this time, when vast hands close across the roof of the world, and the night counts each breath a precious thing. The inky wings of many-legged creatures stir, make small fans, and hold deep captivations of other pitch-black worlds. They, like the water, catch light by nature of their darkness, make uncertainties into answers, broader than understanding, quieter than the ears of this earth. The night folds full around each listener. Space does not exist, except insofar as it tells that somewhere distant and other and clean, the joyous reckonings of darkness go on. The raucous lives of night come again. Voices in the dark are constructions of holy men, given over as though we are deserving, given over though we are, to our bones undeserving, even, perhaps, to watch how fat beetles, fist-sized, are made of the same ineffable, dauntless depths as oceans, are made of a broader night, which we have not been granted permission to drink. They come alone, slow, hardly moving. I am a breath in the light. I will never know the things that watch and unwatch me from the dark, the things that, greater than me, notice and do not. I will never know the courage of the deepest sea, where it is full of the runoff of light. I am only an instant, golden and slim, fragile. I haven't the voice of warrior living. The reverberations of wing motions touch my hollow heart, fill my water-breathing lungs with sacred song. Voices in the dark are nothing, are everything, are the good, cool water in the hands of holy men, whose holy fingers bring God close, whose holy bold illusions are the substance of the night.
Bravo. Yeah, that's great. Very good.
From the French, yeah? I am the light and you don't see me. I am the road and you don't follow me. I am the truth and you don't believe in me. I am the life and you don't seek me. I am your chief, and you don't obey me. I am your God, and you don't pray me. If you are unhappy, don't blame me for it.
Don't blame me.
Don't blame me for it. Not bad, eh? 12 years old child.
The girls are great. Yes. Come along. So happy to have you. Oh, you're going to sing a little song or what, a little poem? What would you like to sing? Hmm? A poem maybe? You wanted to have a drink?
No, I think some should do.
Okay. Is she French or?
She's French.
French?
Yeah, she's
You can sing a little French song if you like. Big loud voice.
Yes, I have a loud voice. We'll save it from the street. Okay. It matters, the language, because I know 5, so it's hard to choose.
Language matters. Yes.
Because
Yes, it matters very much.
I know 5, so it's tricky to.
Yeah. It can be very, very difficult language. I mean, but it's what you remember in your head. But you remember much more than you imagine.
That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. And actually, even if you stop in the middle, it doesn't matter. Nobody knows the song. Nobody can to tell. You can sort of just go
the
on to the
song I
next.
have in my brain, it doesn't matter that song because I sing it morning time. The snow glows white on the mountain, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like the frozen storm inside. Couldn't keep it in, heaven knows I've tried. Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl, always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know. Let it go, let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. Let it go, let it go. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway.
You're going to have the crown. Oh, Alice isn't in the tea party. You really are Alice in Mad Hatter's tea party. Oh, that's really a treat. That's a treat. Would you like a chocolate biscuit?
Okay.
There's only one left. You're lucky, huh?
When I was like 3 all the way to 6, I had an international school, and there I didn't have a very good teachers, but the directress was also a singer.
Oh,
So-
and she saw that you had a talent.
No, actually, the real bit is I had a choral in my school, so I learned how to sing very easily because I had
With
a
the
very
group.
good voice.
Yeah. And you sang in the group first before you sang alone, is that it?
Yeah.
The choral. I did the
Yeah.
same. I love the choral.
But I really, the first time I sang was when I was very little at school. It was very difficult, but I was singing in French first because it was a French school, and then suddenly I started singing in English, and then because I was singing so much, I started to go well with the voices of the characters.
That's really very, very interesting. And do you write poetry by any chance?
No, but I know I have very good ideas for stories and movies in my head.
You should write them down before you forget them.
Yeah.
Do write them down. Don't wait for tomorrow.
That's
Do it
true.
instantly. The ideas come to your head. Always have a little book on you, a little book, and you write down, you capture the little...
Yeah. That happened to me once because I get the ideas from my dreams. At some I just get them like that. The first one was about an episode about Mickey and that one was about, you see, Mickey was acting bad, so his friends just made all the movies go away. So Mickey was there starring. He had to save all the movies and put them in a bag.
Good Lord.
And like that, he would go back home and then everyone would say thank you, and he would start acting good.
And your dreams are very, very important. Don't forget your dreams. Write them down. Please do, because you're full of ideas, and your dreams give you even more ideas, and you can talk to your dreams, you can question, you say, well, now, why is that big elephant there, and that small little ant there, and what does the tree mean, why is the tree, and talk to your dreams, and then you write them down. It makes a book.
Yeah, that's true. So that's why I said to myself one day I will write down all the dreams.
Voila.
So I have to make sure one day I have to make sure that all my dreams are still in my brain.
They will be in your brain because it's your brain. Nobody else can interfere with your brain. And that's the most important thing you can ever give to life. Carry all your dreams in your brain. Carry all your poems in your brain.
This is true.
Just by heart. You come out and you just remember things. It's magic.
Yeah.
That's magic.
That's true. Sometimes I even just do the stories on my computer, because my mum had that computer, but then she got a new one for her birthday, so they gave it to me. And before it was still her computer that I used with my dad sometimes. I used that sometimes when my mum was sleeping, or sometimes when she was awake. I could have...
You could use the computer.
There was a little bit of stories that there was sort of an app that could make stories, and my dad and me, we would do some stories with princesses. And because we didn't have something to do movies, instead we would just take pictures of ourselves to show on the computer.
Yeah. And the computer is good for storing, but don't imagine that the computer has a better mind than you.
Yeah,
this is the best planet in the world. The imagination is the best planet in the world.
Yeah, that's what happens in Pixar.
Voila. You won't find a better planet than your imagination. That's really fabulous.
That's true.
Well, this is really a big treat for us.
That's true.
Well, it's definitely a permanent Mad Hatter's Tea Party on Sunday, but also every other day. I remember once I was at the till, and two French men came in, and they walked in, and suddenly they stopped, and they said, "Do you feel that?" And the other one said, "What?" "Oh yeah, I feel it." And I thought, God, what is going on? They look very smart. They look, they look normal, but they're having an abnormal moment. What's happening? And it turned out that they were geologists, and they could feel the current of water that was flowing underneath the building. And they said to me afterwards, there was a very strong current under this building. And they said, I think that probably explains this very magnetic feeling that you have here, which I put that down to the books and the atmosphere with the books, but perhaps there is this...
That's incredible.
This
that's
additional
very
current.
Druidic, It's very much like the Celts, because the stones were over, the circle like this means water and going up to the sky. That's why I have this old Stonehenge, or things we've lost. This is incredible story.
I know.
Ah.
And then add to that, we're in the shadow of Notre Dame. We're right next to the oldest church in Paris, which is Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre, the oldest tree in Paris, which is in the square right next to that church. There's a combination of things that definitely make this space very magnetic. And I mean, I feel I have a really hard time. I'll complain that I'm here every day, but I have a really hard time being away. And I know it's like that for a lot of other people. Yeah, no, I remember the days when I'd actually hide in the bunk bed here to escape the tea party because it was a Sunday and you know, I was living in the bookshop and as a child I didn't like all the attention that I got. So I would hide up there and just watch the tea party from the bunk bed. And it was pretty chaotic then. That's when Dad didn't allow any washing up liquid and no tea towels, just newspapers. And mouldy milk was absolutely fine. And yogurt cups. So we've moved on to...
Jam jars.
We've moved on to another level.
Yeah, it's difficult to explain George.
Yeah. Well, I think he also had, you know, it was a different generation. I actually think he was way ahead of the game because now everyone's into recycling and actually we know that some bacteria is good for us, and if you're too hygienic then it's actually, you know, not healthy. So I think he was ahead of the game, but he took it a little far at times when there was mold on milk and he thought that was okay. No, he couldn't bear to throw anything away, so he was you know, he saved everything, which is a little bit how he built the bookshop. He put everything into the bookshop and he saved every penny for the bookshop and didn't spend anything on himself or on any kind of anything that he thought was a bit extravagant. He didn't spend anything. I know Tumbleweed said to me the other day, who stayed with George, he said, I went to the flea market with your dad and your dad was getting some books, and then he said to me, go and get me some shoes and some glasses. And the Tumbleweed said, okay, but what size and what kind of glasses? And George said, just look at me, look at my feet, anything will do, anything that will fit this kind of foot, go. And that was it. But I think that really represents his character of, you know, no fuss, just get straight to the point and save everything for what really matters, which for him was the bookshop.
If you walk around with feet that are too big in the shoes, you put on an extra pair of socks.
Exactly.
That was his kind of feeling, you know. What do you mean you waste money?
Well, I mean, I think George already set all the kind of, he had such a great, strong philosophy and ethos with the bookshop that all the stones are there, and I feel like I'm just building on top of it. And so one of it is the prize that we did was for unpublished writers, because I felt that was very in line with the bookshop, which is to support writers, and most of those writers that come through don't have much money. That's why they need to stay here. And then also, so we were opening a cafe in September, and that was another dream of George's, because he really saw it as a very strong community here. Yeah. And so it's true that extending that community with a cafe and with also there's so many different people that are attracted to a bookshop, that it's just sort of being a welcoming place for all those people, and perhaps having exhibitions, or like you said, a publishing house. We're publishing our first book in September, which is a history of Shakespeare and Company, which is 450 pages long. It's a massive undertaking. It's taken 2 years. But so all those things just come sort of very naturally, because the bookshop kind of easily houses all those different walks of life and different artists, people from
but you're doing it your way. I think that must be something that I've noticed. I mean, okay, George, fine, but he's still, the atmosphere is still there. But I think that I think it's more than just building on top of George myself. My feeling is, no, you've got your way, and I'm sure that he'll be absolutely delighted. Oh, he'd scream and yell. I mean, he'd scream and yell because he never wanted to change anything. You know, you don't touch it. But I think deep in his soul, I think that he knew that because he said, when I wrote that poem, Ode to the Bookshop, he said, I have two spirits, the shop and my daughter. There's no separation, they were the two. So it's one spirit, actually. And your spirit, he knew that you would do a good job. A chip of the old block there, and I don't believe that you're just building on building stones. All right, so he put the building stones, but you've got many things that George would never do. George wouldn't do it. You wouldn't open that second door that you've opened downstairs, or open up all these marvelous, look at it, all these poutres and things like that. That's money. You know, the thing is that she's doing it her way, the feminine way. So we need these kind of people. Yeah, I think.
There was the first time I put in a toilet in the bookshop was in 2004. And before that, we just had those, Turkish toilets in the stairway,
you
which
stand
were
up,
disgusting. Yeah. And I put it in, and then Dad came down with a hammer that night to take it out. And a tumbleweed reminded me of this. I didn't remember this. I shouted at him, "Dad, we're girls. We need a toilet." And somehow he accepted it because I said it in that way.
Yeah.
Because he accepted that, you're girls.
Thinking on it. Yeah.
Somehow, I don't know, and he thought, I do want the girls to stay, so,
And he said that was the thing he loved most in his life. He told me, I was waiting for him to come up with some great philosophy. George, what is the thing that you've loved most in your life? And he was a little sitting up here, and I knew he was going to come up with something. A little smile committed. The girls. Nothing else. The girl. This was one of the poems I always wrote for George Whitman on his birthday. This was in 12th of November 2010. He passed away in 2011. And the muse of the poem is twofold, that of his shop and daughter, which George said to me were twin souls of his spirit. So is the twin inspiration behind this poem. George Whitman's Leaves of Grass and Sylvia Whitman's Feminine Seeds. Part 1. Tea chats. On a Sunday afternoon, hail, rain or shine, there looms a golden moment outside time, where tea and cakes awake visitors and friends who meet, exchange stories, ideas, become part of a magic circle spun from a man's generous mind. To welcome as a family all kinds of strangers passing through a city full of ancient lore, whose whispers live as souvenirs within stones and pages of books, in a shop unique of its kind, where George Whitman's dreams hide among leaves of other people's lives. Part 2. There floats today a silver cloud with wings spread wide as her smile. She's her father's guardian angel, welcoming crowds who browse and while away happy hours in this house of many mansions, which harbour sails of different ships, seeking secrets buried deep inside their souls, not always understood, though felt within this mythic space, hoarding untold treasures of 1,001 adventures, mystic pheromones stacked on shelves, souvenirs of a man's desire to leave some trace to futures of his created child, of love and grace.
Criticism is about distinction, right? Distinguishing, separating out the wheat from the chaff. Yeah. And I read just the other day, I reread a marvelous work of J.D. Salinger's, who we're about to, it's almost as if we've rolled away the stone and get to see, the lost dialogues of Aristotle, the poems of Sappho. J.D. Salinger, who wrote, stopped publishing in the 1960s. We're about to get more of his books. It's kind of this dream come true. And he wrote this work called Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenter, a quote from Sappho, from a translation of Sappho. Yeah. Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenter. And in it, this family called the Glass family. Seymour Glass is the protagonist, and an eldest brother of this family of vaudevillian children, 7 of them. And he talks about distinction, and that for him, he's a great devotee of Zen and of Eastern spirituality. And one of the great principles of Eastern spirituality is not to distinguish.
Yeah.
That the most vulgar person on the metro is as holy as the Dalai Lama.
That's what we were just talking about that young man that was in the tea party. Oh, you were at that tea
Which
party. You were reading Sappho. No, you were reading Greek.
Ah.
And then there was a man in the corner, I never forget him, and he said, oh, he said, who's Sappho? Who knows about Sappho? You know, the thing was that he went on to read, because you had to leave, I think you were playing tennis or something, but he went on to read his poem, which was quite remarkable, he was Irish, and about how can, when you think you go to Westminster Abbey and you see all these generals and all these English who have been killing everybody all over the world, you think that's right? You think it's he kind of was, again, the Irish and the English will always be fighting. But I mean, and going back to George, when about distinction, when he says, oh, I don't want, you can read your poems, but I don't want you to have other people reading their poem. You'll have every Tom, Dick and Harry reading their bad poetry. I said, George, is there such a thing as bad poetry? If you don't leave these people express themselves and tell them even if it's bad, I mean, even in badness, there's some germ of maybe goodness when you can, then they can find themselves, as you say, very simply, just telling them. And one man of 60 said, the first time anybody has ever asked me to read my poetry. And I said, but that's beautiful. But he said, yes, I think it is, but I never thought anybody would be interested in it. 60 years old, you know? And he was so... That's the same thing you do with your students. It's the same thing.
But I struggle with it, because on the one hand, I am very attracted to this Eastern ideal of non-distinction. On the other hand, is Kim Kardashian's memoir really as good as King Lear? If it isn't, then you have to distinguish. And then we're back to this Western Homeric arete, the Greek word for excellence, the striving for something truly great and memorable and lasting and indelible and immortal. It's hard. It's hard to abandon distinction. And so, as a student of the Western canon, I admire this Eastern attachment to non-attachment, but I fail. I fail to achieve it in my own sense of taste. I think taste is important. I think taste is one of the greatest things that doesn't require money. It doesn't require education. All it requires is a discerning eye, and absolutely anyone can have it. It's a wonderfully democratic idea, taste. And I think it's worth defending. But I also struggle with it because, as Panmelys says, even bad poetry can be good poetry. And I think the fact that she does these tea parties in France is especially wonderful setting for it, because in France, and I've learned this as a professor in a French university, French students are not Sciences Po. French students are not asked to share their subjectivity.
Voilà.
They are told what is true, what is worth remembering, and they are judged and evaluated on their ability to obey, to write between the lines, and to recall what has been imparted unto them by the replacement for God and Napoleon in the classroom, who is their teacher, right? Who is a truly divine Napoleonic figure. And so, like Panmelys's philosophy of the Tea Party is basically what I've adopted to the classroom in Sciences Po. And that is that every student has something unlocked that is worthy of being unlocked in them. An épanouissement, what Aristotle called a eudaimonia. And that it takes, you have to go and sometimes grab them by the scruff of the neck and say, we want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear your poem. And you stand up and do it, you know?
That little girl that read that Shakespearean poem at the end of the lecture, it was marvelous.
It was fantastic. And there are not enough spaces in 2015 for people to feel so comfortable. Because we sit behind our screens and we look at the people on YouTube doing that, and we don't participate in it. And to give people the permission, at the tea parties and in class or at the book club, to share and to express and to orate, and to incant their favorite poems, I think is something that we need to do more.
I was making films, short films at that time. And one day, one film was shown in Cannes, in Le Certain Regard, which is, in Cannes. And someone told me, oh, but your film is totally Proustian. what is Proustian? And I said, okay, maybe, probably. And then I started to realize how important that reading of Proust had been to me, and how it had changed my way of seeing things and my way of doing films too. Okay, I was having some tea. It's really true. I was having some tea and I said, okay, I love this book. I know it by heart. I'm obsessed by this book. I can't get rid of that obsession. Why don't I make a film? But what kind of film could I make? I don't want to make a fiction because it's not possible. The narrator doesn't have any face. The narrator is the reader. It's me. It's the reader. And then the idea, came upon me like boom. Okay, then if the reader is the narrator or the narrator the reader, then the reader will be the narrator of my film, and so I will have all the book read by all sorts of people. I read Proust when I was on a very long trip alone abroad through South America. And, Proust has to be read either on a big trip or in a special moment of one's life. That's what happens mostly. Most people do that. And so I traveled and I had the book inside of my bag. And I said, okay, I'm here in South America. I read mostly Spanish-speaking books. And I have this book, but I don't want to read it, but I have it in my bag and I know it protects me. It's my French part I bring all along with me. And I hope maybe I will feel like reading it. And that is exactly what happened. 6 months I was traveling alone. And 6 months after I had left Paris, I wanted to read the book, to have something French, very French. I knew I had started to read the book, like 10, 20 pages, and I knew what it was about. And so I said, okay, I need that now. Otherwise I would go back to see my ma. And then it happened. I read the book and I was, swallowed by the book. What was funny is I was all that trip that I made 1 year alone, I read a lot. And I was really, like in an imaginary trip also, filled with all the books I read. Because the books I read, for instance, I would come to Chile and I would ask to the bookstore, oh, who are your authors? And they would give me some books. And I would start to read a book and I would say, oh, why don't I go in the village where the book takes place? And I would take a bus, 1,000 kilometers and reach and finish the book in the right place. So I had not only a life full of books, but also of books which were filled with, smells, images. Of course, I would see the right church. It was which was in the book. I would see it with my eyes. I would hear the noises. I would hear the people talking. So it was already, in a way, embodied, And that's how I met Proust. Way of thinking, way of being. And so I came back. Well, actually, I asked my mother. It was long ago, so there was not internet. I wrote a letter to my mother. It took 1.5 months to come here to France. And I asked, can you send me the volume 2 in, where will I be in 3 months? Oh, okay, I will be probably in Quito. Okay, so send it to Quito, please. And so my mother sent it, and I was happy to go to Quito also to get the second volume and to go on reading.
in the Cevennes, in the mountains where I live in down south in France. We had a discussion with friends of mine, and I said, given the states of art and culture in France today, the thing I would advise all my friends, and among those friends, those that are artists or poets or writers, whatever, is create whatever you want to create and give it to your family and friends and relatives and close acquaintances, and be content with that. And that is why I must say I'm very happy to be here today, because this is close to this ideal, I was defining in that discussion, to give whatever you do, whatever you create, to the people you love, and be content with that. As opposed to the greed, the ambition, the longing for being seen and loved by an anonymous audience, and pleasing anybody, as opposed to that. The big problem is danger of losing yourself. Well, it's simply to remain outside the circle of worldliness, and be maybe not absolutely close to absolute truth, but at least feel closer to truth and sincerity.
Wisdom. And whether it gives a satisfaction, it's not that. It's not. The idea is to pass on the message. It's always that idea. Whether this is my personal feeling, is whether I know myself is another question. Do I know myself? I'm not sure. I think others know me better than I know myself, because they label you with whatever they want to feel they see or think. And often I have this idea that I was just born the way I am, complete with what I am trying to pass on and teach. I'm not so sure that I think it's the truth or whether we know. I'm not convinced in anything. I'm the kind of person who only believes in the contradiction and in the inevitable almost of what is going to happen to worlds, and you're involved. Salt of the earth for mother. I saw the house-braked wives plod uphill. Their knotted hands clutched around threadbare purses. I heard them cluck like hens in chicken coops. Their bony feet scratched seeds on stony ground. I caught their labored breaths, closed up tight in worried frowns, whimpering sounds from thin-lipped mouths. I spied such was their lot. Dried wrinkles owned before time, blushed brides bled and begot. I ate their bread soups, sobered down brewed miracles of nature's gifts, as their smiles spread. I watched their faces melt. Faded blooms became flowers as we scooped and downed their proud offering.
I was invited to take part in a collective publication around the theme of filiation, okay? Mm-hmm. And it was organized by a group of artists, academics, writers, poets, and that sort of people. And I decided I didn't know what I was going to do. No. Okay, and one morning I just wrote this at one go. Yeah.
But when you say affiliation, did you actually know that it was on towns, or was it that you put in the towns?
No, it's Seeking Affiliations.
Okay.
That's the title I chose.
Okay.
You remember I said searching after affiliations,
yes.
and you suggested seeking affiliations, which I think is much better.
Yeah.
And so that this is what I contributed to this collective project, you know, and it was published in 2008, and it was written in 2006.
And this is a translation of the work,
and
which
this
is
is an English translation from the French text that I did myself this morning. So seeking affiliations. And one more detail is on that year, 2006, the Printemps des Poètes, the poets' spring, you know, had a theme, which was the Song of Towns. Okay. And frankly, I didn't think much of that title, you know, Song of Towns. So it's that's why I concentrated in this text on the theme of the Song of Towns, and then it developed on something else. So seeking affiliations. The Song of Towns is silence. Everyone at home, within their walls, or in the streets, well, at home, is abroad. The Song of Towns is loneliness forgetting there is no separation whatsoever. The Song of Towns is waking up in the small hours, rising before sunrise, and the drone of engines, and the electric lights, and people bustling about before daybreak. What is it all about? But what is a town? Is it something capable of song? A citizen is maybe, but, well, incidentally, what is a citizen? There's a more urgent question, though. What is a neighbor? The Song of Towns is a hovering voice through streets and neighborhoods, crowded, fashionable spots where nothing truly happens. Speak the silence which speaks and resonates in your head, heart, chest, guts. The Song of Towns is the body at one with the rustle of trees. The lapping sound of the fountains does not extinguish the obstinate murmur of subterranean waters. Earth gone green again, things here and there growing and rising. Thanks. The Song of Towns is tiny bedroom on fire, two bodies gliding heavenwards through the ceiling of a tiny little flat. The Song of Towns is music from the trees all over the rooftops, joy of dawn choruses in the standstill of dawn. Poetry is a vacant lot, the field of research. Abroad, you seek some territory. Solitude seeks the connection. The meaning is there, somewhere, within the very vacant field. A deep buried ancient treasure, guarded and protected by the earth, watched over by the sky. a treasure of ancient symbols bound up with a network of stars and forces. Become an archaeologist to sing within the town, without the town. Wherever is that writer who writes on tree trunks, stones, rocks and pebbles? Where that writer who writes like some wind in the smoke of whatever is burning has to be burnt out? Or in the sand of the desert for any other wind which will sweep it all clean? That writer I want to see. That silence I want to listen for. Those eyes and hands I want to read. That breath I want to drink in. By that writer's side I want to walk, attuned to that being's heartbeat. Wherever is the first creature on this earth, being of light, the walking tree, whether a market or a stage or a parlour, that being only passes through on occasion. If he or she passes, all high-sounding words and lines turn into dust. That happens sometimes, even if she or he passes very far away in the distance, or even doesn't pass at all. Wherever is the writer who painlessly resigns him or herself to writing with this or that language, which is no more his or hers than any other foreign language. There's no language for poets. Poetry is a voice without a language. Some, in great number, polish and burnish and shine their native alien tongue into a mirror where others will see them and see themselves, and all will admire themselves and one another in complete blindness. Wherever is the writer who loves no words, all words being more or less senseless, collars of pearls, sweets, exploits in conformity, screens over the vast world, or curtains of smoke, even without a fire. That writer, whether we know it or not, writes on trees, stones, all sorts of rocks and crystals, and in the mud of all paths, and on the flanks of hills, and in steep wayside ditches. But what that writer would love above all else, I do know it, is an old worm-eaten table in the middle of a meadow, under a tree of light, near crystal clear running waters. I nearly forgot, or maybe I didn't dare say it. I was told that writer is planning to write on the surface of all waters, on the very foam of waves, and is very much tempted to write on waterfalls, cascades, and even torrents. But where on earth is that being? That being I want to see. That silence I want to listen for. Those eyes and hands I want to read. That breath I want to drink in. By that writing being's side I want to walk, attuned to that heartbeat. May that writer write fire and light in my very flesh and bones, heart and blood, brain and spine, chest and guts. May that writer take my will and command my tongue, lips and hand.
I had no idea, actually, of how would I say? I thought it was a crazy idea, and I had no idea that some people, like Godard, for instance, had theorized that idea, that it would be great to have books read. Simply, it would be movie. And I was very happy when I read that sentence. Of course, it was after I had started the film, because I started the film, when I had the idea, 2 days after I had started, because I said to myself, oh no, I cannot do that. It's too much time. I was younger then, and I didn't know if I was able to keep on for so many years with a project, because it was at least 20 years, I was thinking then. So I said, okay, I will start, so the question won't be anymore. I will have to do it. And then I started, and people around me, everyone actually say to me, but you're crazy. What are you doing? It's not a movie. No one will look at that. It will be much too long. And I had the intimate feeling that it was real movie. And when I read the sentence that Godard had written, of course, then I was very happy to read that, because I think that too. I think that the reading, it's in the way the person reads, the voice. I think really the mirror effect works totally. And especially with Proust, of course. It's not any writer. It is Proust, because Proust really speaks about us, about our souls, our emotions, our feelings, and he really sends us back the complexity of all those things for us, of our emotions. And he sends them back to us, and he helps us resolve it, through those long sentences. And so, no, it is movie. It is movie because it is time. Actually, when you look at my film today it is 5 days and 4 nights long. So that's about 120 hours. So you cannot look at it thoroughly, of course. You always fall asleep, or you go away, or you go to eat, but it doesn't matter. It is time. It is a big parenthesis of time, And movie for me is that. I sleep when I go to the movies. I do, sometimes, and I just love the impression of what comes, the memory of the moments where I've slept. They are here. And the book of Proust is about that. It starts in the night, and it's the first part. It's really like a whole night where he remembers. Well, he doesn't quite remember. It's not the word, but memories, come, and he is between different consciences, between awakeness and sleep, and also dreams, and the whole book is about that. So, movie is that too for me. Well, I've been doing that for 22 years. So, of course, it has influenced me in many ways. For instance, a kind of freedom towards time, time in film. I just love to, to let time decide what is going to happen in the film. Time can change that within one shot, but there are other things. The fact that I have met so many people, and they have brought their life into my film, because each time it's a portrait. It's a really because it's 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes, so it's very long time. So they cannot hide. The camera films everything, and especially with that relationship to the text. It happens quite often that the person, the text actually, we film, the story, one page after the other. So it's 2 pages each time. And when I send the 2 pages, which are to the next reader, it happens very often that that person tells me, it's incredible, you have sent me those 2 pages, but they speak about me. That's exactly what I'm in at that moment, those thinkings, or that's exactly what happened to me with my mother. Very often the pages match with the person. That's what the person thinks. Actually, the whole book matches. But they have those pages and they recognize themselves. So, but they cannot know everything, because Proust, the richness of Proust is also that you can read it 10 times. You will read 10 different books. It's a kind of a deepness, of the senses. And so they read and they see themselves, and they are, happy or, troubled. That all appears. But also they are surprised, because there always come a moment where they read something they hadn't seen. And you can see everything on the faces and in the voices. It's extraordinary. So finally, I filmed about 1,200 persons, more or less, in those years. And I've been, developing a sense. I can feel people now, thanks to that practice I've been doing of filming every time a new person with the same text or with a new text. But I've been, and so in my way to do documentaries, it has helped me a lot. I can feel the persons. I have some kind of easiness. Yes, my last film, for instance, Je suis Anne-Marie Schwarzenbach, is a film where I led a lot of places to improvisation. And I think Proust, that work with Proust has lent me to that improvisation wish, that wish of improvisation.
Identity etymologically means sameness. That's impossible. You cannot be the same, for all your lifetime, I think I would define identity precisely as multiplicity, even potential native and potential multiplicity. And this is, I think, where the modernity goes wrong. With this idea of specialization. We are natively multiple, and it's a good thing to take care of that, take that into account, and not let oneself be
bogged down.
Yeah, or confined, Well, I think it's sad to be one, but it's more subtle than that, because I have a saying that this comes from my diary. In fact, it says, plus je suis multiple, plus je suis un. Plus je suis un, plus je suis multiple. The more I am one, and the more multiple I am. And the more multiple I am, the more I am one. Which means if you build, it takes a long time, a center of consciousness, a center of gravity, which is there, inside. It's your spine,
Everyone has
in a
it.
backbone, Then you can do lots of things.
You can develop it.
But you identify with nothing, and the less you identify, and the more efficient you are. That's very paradoxical, but I can tell you, it's a discovery for everyone to make.
People are almost afraid of losing that identity. That's it. It's the fear. The people have a fear. It's easy to talk, as we say. So you have to sort of try and find ways. I don't know whether we will or whether I have in my works. I mean, whatever I've written, I hope that I have given messages that could show them doors to open, that could show the way. That's maybe the job today, more than ever, of the poets.
Yeah.
Maybe it's always been like that.
Yeah.
And poetry belongs to the song and the dance and it's not just to be read, like in a very flat voice where people get, tired and start to dodder off to sleep. No, it has to be vibrating, it has to be full of life and energy, and everyone can do that. You can do marvelous things that you never believed that you could do. And that's the job of the poet to a little, to make them understand, to make them aware that they can go out there.
Sowing the seeds of change and discovery and adventure.
Love that. Sowing the seeds of change, beautiful.
And discovery and adventure as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cosmic vibrations are everywhere. Tonight I could paint this and there would be different colors. Everybody's got a color, you know what I mean? When you look at that's what's nice when you have the evolution of an artist, you can see that's they're already developing very early, 10, 20 years before you come up with the actual, and it was the same with Pollock, the same with Roscoe, all these. And Nicolas de Stael was struggling all the time. He grabbed back his paintings and there was a law case. Nicolas de Stael, he lost the law case. They said, no, the artist is always right. the man had paid for the painting, and he said one night he was visiting me. He said, no, I want to take it back. And it came back. When it came back, he said it was another painting. That's not what I bought. He took him to court, but Nicolas de Stael won the case. So, you know, who's to decide when a painting is even finished? Morning mists. Mists like frothy clouds, foggy view of early morning dew on trees, grass, leaves. All things looking like pearls. Snowdrops, a child's tears before nature's beauty. Frosts, sprawling filiform patterns on window panes, forming forests, frozen landscapes, hair-like, spidery. Fossil relics stretched in the mind, tracing childhood's eye.
Archaeology means the science of the ancient. And I have an Irish friend who died a few years ago, unfortunately, Michael Poinder. And he wrote a beautiful book with a very provocative title, you know. He didn't mean it to be provocative, but it was received as provocative. It was Lost Signs of the Stone Age.
Lost Signs.
It's a beautiful book. Yeah, I mean, you can get it on the internet very easily. Lost Signs of the Stone Age by Michael Poinder. And that's what I mean by archaeology. I mean, and it's essentially, it's an essential part of poetry, you know, because what I understand by archaeology is science of ancient symbols, or as Panmelys would say, signs and symbols, which have been lost in the history of civilization, of modern civilization, progressive civilization, you know, but I think archaeology deals more with what is eternal than what is ancient, you know. So it's a deceptive word in itself. It's science of the ancient. To me, it's science of what is eternal. But those eternal signs and symbols have been lost in the process of modernization, progressiveness, and the rest, you know. So that's what I mean by art or poetry and archaeology, you know, is reviving this sense of the sacred which has been lost. And the sacred is everywhere, you know, everywhere. And I think, to start with, I mean, in human relationships, meeting someone else is sacred. I mean, the other is sacred, you know, and everything. I mean, looking at a flower, a tree, you know, a bee, whatever, everything is sacred. And I remember a prayer, a Druidic prayer, but I have it in French. I don't think.
I'll say it in French.
I would say in French it's
Druidic, Irish.
No, Breton prayer.
Breton.
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't be able
And
to translate it.
they say it on the 1st of November every year, ritually, you know. So it's toi le sans nom, donne-nous ton appui, et avec ton appui, la force, et avec la force, compréhension, et avec la compréhension, le savoir, et avec le savoir, savoir tout ce qui est juste. Et avec le savoir de tout ce qui est juste, aimer. Aimer chaque chose vivante. The conclusion is love every living creature.
Graffiti of the dreams. To come back to what you were just saying, the archaeology, I've written the poem called Graffiti of the Genes. That means that everything that the past has left is not lost. It's not lost. It's all these signs and symbols on the, as you say, you just said, in your glass, in your pebbles, in your stones, in your trees. All these things that we have that the past has left us are important. This is graffiti of the genes.
Yeah.
In our genes are the memory of millions and millions of years.
Yeah.
Maybe the first Big Bang.
Okay, I agree with you, but
I don't ask you to agree with me.
No, but I agree with you. But when I say everyone's a poet potentially, I mean we don't have only one life on this planet. You know, that's that changes the point of view.
No, that changes.
And that's why
I believe in other life.
That's why you have people responding very keenly to sensitively to poetry, because maybe they've already been poets, but there are determinisms which escape our understanding and escape our memory. Okay, and some people remember, and then they become what they have been, what they were, and they become that in another life, and they remember without knowing they're remembering, and that's maybe our case, you know.
That's the poem that he likes.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, you know, everyone's a poet, because I don't conceive of human destiny as made up of only one life on planet Earth. I think there are two. I would think of two ways of going about it. One way, I think I would define taking my cue from Christian Bobin's, you know, quotation, the one I told you before we lunched, yeah, and he said, for any young writer today, I would advise just try to adapt, do everything to please the publishers and the public, and when you've carved out your niche, then you start doing the real thing that you want to do with your guts and heart, you know. So which implies some sort of ruse or craftiness, you know, calculation, you know. I enjoy that. It's a good way to go about life, you know. It's a good way. But the other way, I think, which I would think maybe purer, maybe impossible, is conceive of your relation to language as something absolutely sacred. Take language as a sacred tool or instrument, you know? And that changes the whole thing. But it's difficult to deny that there is some magic, whatever you may understand by that word, about language. I mean, in the East, I mean, they say mantras which have a deep influence on your psyche. You can use mantras to invoke certain positive spirits and to call help from the heavens, you know. So I can't deny that there is something magic, but maybe
mystical.
Yeah, magic is magic in the sense of something that you can do or say, sounds that you're going to produce to have an influence on the energies of life. Yeah, and I think there is something like that in poetry. Some poems, you know, depress you, you know, and others exalt you. But to me, I think I'm very much into what Kenneth White wrote a lot about. He said poetry. He said, to me, good poetry is poetry which exalts people, which inspires noble emotions, and you know, I think that's a very good conception.
I realized it because when I was doing documentaries, and I worked faster and faster, actually. You know, I would come into a place, meet people, and I would say right away, okay, we'll do that, and feel the right place to do it. You know, so, and I realized too that it gave me freedom. I don't know, you know, it's not. I'm not afraid of anything, actually. When I film, I mean, of course. I'm not afraid. I just trust my intuition much more than before. Before I had to lean on theories or practices I had learned. Now, I don't. What is important is to have a real, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I've got this film as a path to follow. The path is very strict. You know, the book, all the words of the book shall be read. And it's a path which I cannot do. You know, I could imagine lots of things. People ask me all the time, do you ask also the people what they think about Proust and how they came to read that book? And I say, no, it's just a reading. So it's very strict, you know. But through that contraint, that, you know, you have obligation, then comes freedom. It's I would say, you know, voilà, one has to really think of how to get freedom through constraints, constrained.
Well, I could very simply refer again to George Steiner in his fantastic book entitled After Babel, yeah, a beautiful essay on translation and literature. And there's one chapter where he develops the idea of 17th century classicism in France. Well, according to him, it has never left France, literally speaking, culturally speaking, ideologically speaking, because he insists on that point that classicism has nothing to do with aesthetics or art or beauty. Classicism is a wave of normalization. It's something ideological and political above all. Okay, and the aesthetic and artistic aspect is only secondary. It's only a consequence. Yeah, so it's the normalization of all local languages and cultures in France. That's what classicism is all about, and he develops this idea that classicism has never left France in French literature, poetry, and he says even it's there. It lurks behind the mask of modernisms and even surrealisms. It is still there, you know, classicism. Because when you oppose something, it means that the thing you oppose has a great influence on yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't think of opposing it, you know. What I call the silences of the non-creating mass, if you like. And that's another aspect that many Irish...
like that. The silences of the non-creating mass. That's very good.
Yeah, and it's an idea that many Irish poets emphasize.
Well, it's very druidic.
They say, I don't exist. I'm just the loudspeaker for the whole of the Irish people, you know. They don't say anything, we don't hear them. I speak for them. And I'm pure enough to be able to guess what they want to express that they cannot express, and I express it for them. And there is something Christic about it, in the sense that it can lead you sometimes to extreme suffering, because you take in, whether you know it or not, whether you're aware of it or not, you take in the whole silent suffering of the whole people, you know, of the whole mass, and you take it in and you live it, you experience it, you know, and you do whatever you can do with it, you know.
That's the sign of a true poet, because we are born with our skins inside out.
Exactly.
So we're raw.
Exactly.
Raw flesh. Celtic Vibrations, homage to W.B. Yeats. I wrote this in 1995. Interesting. In a time when time was unconscious, so not as it seems, simply there. 9 hazels of wisdom grew deep in a well below the sea, known as the hazels of inspiration. Their fruit and leaves birthed in a like hour, showering the well with their know-how, forming a great purple wave called the knowledge of poetry. Take heed, new worlds, burdened and bent down of the words, knowledge of poetry, where Olars, druids spent lifetimes learning all arts of their trades, poetic wisdom.
I mean, there is something Christic about the greatest poets, you know, the greatest artists. Thinking of Van Gogh, Antonin Artaud, Modigliani,
All the greatest who were
Rimbaud.
never...
I mean, there is something Christic about those people.
All the ones who never got anywhere. When you speak about identification and you're speaking about the critic, you have to be somewhere before you can be criticized. Nobody's criticized me because I'm nowhere, so I'm quite happy. You know, just to sort of... In the end, perhaps... George Whitman said that to me. He said, "You've understood. You're great. You'll be greater because you've understood what the mystery is all about. And the mystery is what people like the most. What they don't know about Jesus Christ. What they don't know about Socrates. What they don't know about Shakespeare. It gives them enormous vista of imagination, and they make up incredible stories because they cannot imagine genius. Genius doesn't know about himself. Genius is ordinary. Genius is not conscious of its genius.
And that perspective helps us understand the ambiguous relation of, well, I don't like the word, but I have to use it, the ambiguous relation of the bourgeoisie to artists. That is to say, the bourgeoisie would like to be healed by artists. But at the same time, they're afraid of being healed. And that explains their ambiguity in their relation to the artists. They admire them, they put them on pedestals, you know, but at the same time, they organize things, I mean, politically, ideologically, to sort of, how shall I put it, you know, to constrain them, you know, though they want to be healed, but they're afraid of being healed, and they know the artists could heal them, but they don't want to, although they dream of being healed, you know, and that explains the whole tension between the bourgeoisie, the reigning bourgeoisie, the triumphant bourgeoisie of today, and the artists. You know?
Most of the French great artists came from the bourgeoisie, including Baudelaire, Victor Hugo, maybe not so much Rimbaud, but quand même he had a certain amount of very, very solid upbringing.
Yeah, but they didn't refrain from suffering, as most bourgeois do.
No, but bourgeoisie, a lot of the great
they have the courage to suffer.
Comes from bourgeoisie, so don't be so quick to sort of criticize the bourgeoisie. A lot of the great artists, they were excommunicated.
That's
including what's his name with the V there, who went to England and said we were all little shopkeepers.
I forgot. Voltaire,
with the V.
Well,
Voltaire, Chateaubriand, all the great writers, all of them. And now today you've got Jean Ormesson, you've got Michel Serres, all even the philosophers today, they all come out of the bourgeoisie. Because the bourgeoisie have given them a chance for an education, remember?
Yeah, but Jean d'Ormesson and Michel Serres, I wouldn't take as examples.
It's a contemporary example.
Yeah, I wouldn't take as examples of, I wouldn't take them as exemplary, really.
You wouldn't take them as exemplary, Michel Serres? Well, I think he's exemplary. I think he's a very great philosopher.
Yeah, maybe, but he's not.
Have you read
he's
him?
no help for anybody. You know, he's no help for anybody.
He's difficult
he's
to
a very
read,
civilized philosopher. Very civilized philosopher. Okay.
Civilization is bourgeoisie.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. That's what the thing you're saying. So let's don't criticize too much because a lot of the great artists, you can't deny it, René.
Yeah.
We didn't come from it.
But what's Michel Serres and what's the other one?
Well, I wouldn't.
What they lack is they never suffered, you know.
Well, come along now. No, come on. Everybody suffers. We're born to suffer. You suffer because you know you're going to die. There's a marvellous word in Welsh called hirais. Hirais is a longing for something this world can never give. Emphasis on the this. Because all the Druids, all the Olafs, all these ancient religions believed ultimately in the other life. That's what we've lost. We've lost with the introduction of the three great religions, which came from other societies. So you've got the Jewish, you've got Islam, you've got Christianity, fighting today, killing each other,
but there's
separating. They absolutely lost the idea of the other life.
But there's another thing we lost in modern civilization is the dignity of suffering, the value of suffering. I wrote an essay entitled The Virtue of Depression, because what is depression? In the mystical tradition, it is what is known as the first death, which leads to the second birth. And the second birth is the real birth, because it means you're no longer attached to your parents or whatever, and you open yourself to something absolutely new. You're no longer the same person. So depression has become a kind of shameful disease, when in fact depression, if it is taken as it ought to be taken, it's what mystics called the first death. You stop doing all the things you didn't want to do, and you die to your first self, and then you know your second birth, which is the most beautiful birth.
It's strange, it's weird, because really everybody told me that it was a crazy idea, that it was not a movie. I thought I would propose it to the TV, and they say no, they're not interested. Actually I worked 7 years without even editing the film, just filming. And there was one moment where I thought, okay, I'm doing it. I think it's movie, but people don't want to feel the same way. I don't care. What cares for me is to give a tribute to Proust. That's my mission. I decided that I would do that because it was one of the reasons, of course, in the beginning I didn't tell you that, but the reason was I owe something to Proust. He was so important to me. I keep on reading him all the time. I have to do something to pass, I put my hand and I can touch him, and I pass him to future and to. So I make his book alive, and so it was my motivations. I said, okay, then I'm doing it just for my pleasure, of course, because it's also a pleasure to hear someone reading Proust. I'm like that when I film, and also I do it for him. And I'm sure it's a movie, but they don't want to know, they will learn it after. But I also said, actually, I don't care if the film is ever showed. What is important to me is to make it. Because I'm a movie maker, and a movie maker is, before everything, someone who makes movie. I make. I'm not having the ideas and not realizing them. I just make. I don't care whether it will be shown or not. The fact that I'm doing it every week, once a week I go and film someone, I'm a movie maker. And so it changed, of course, my way of seeing myself. It was important to me. My status changed. I was a movie maker. I was the only one to know it, but I was. What happened actually was the first person to get interested in my work was my future husband. He came to me and he said, "Oh, I'm making an exhibition, and I want to show your work." So I edited the film, and it was showed for the first time. And right away, actually, it was successful. I mean, in a way that lots of people would come across the videos. It was in a museum, and they would react and they would ask to be in the film. I have to go back before I started. I don't think that idea came from nothing. I'm not God. That idea came from works I had seen, and especially the work of a painter whose name is Opalka. He was writing, he all his life, well, a big part of his life, and until his death, he painted numbers. He started with 1, then with 2, and when he stopped, he was millions of, and he wrote white on black, and each new painting was the black was not so black; it was graying, and then he was and in the end he was writing white on white, you know. So he was reaching the white, and it was every day, you know. And of course, I think my film was really influenced by that work, because I was fascinated, of course, by that idea of being absorbed, you know, by work you do every day and by the white, the painting. And when I said I wanted to get rid of the Proust obsession, it was exactly the contrary that happened. I'm more obsessed with Proust now, but I'm much more free within that obsession. You know, I live in it, and it's light. But coming back to the reception of the film in the Grand Palais, for instance, or I think so many people love Proust. They just like to see the movie, to enter the movie, and I think they love also that liberty. You know, it's been a long time I've been doing that, so things have changed, and I've got. It's been easier. In the beginning, it was not so easy because I was alone and nobody would like the film, nobody would get interested. But now it's different, of course. People want to see the film. You call me. I'm invited in universities to speak about the film, you know. So it's different. Yeah. So the book it's a funny story. I was filming someone, because, you know, always something happens when I film. I film on streets, everywhere actually, and I was filming, and the reader chooses the place where he is going to be filmed. So I filmed someone. He's a writer, French writer, and he is also publisher. And okay, where do you want me to film you? I want to be filmed in the most neutral place that we can find. And he said, okay, I want to be filmed in a shop for carrelage. You know, in the kitchen you put on the wall, it's white and it's well, okay. So I find a shop. And I asked them, are they okay? They are okay. And I filmed him. And after the filming, we are here, there is a camera between us, and we start to talk about Proust, and we are totally excited because we talk about what he has just read. And, you know, we are, Proust, and it's so funny because he writes this, and then, you know, it relates to that, and da. And comes in the shop a young man, you know, delivering something. He has a helmet on, and he comes in, and we don't see him because we are talking, and he's standing between us, waiting that we finish. And then all of a sudden I see him, and I say, you are looking for the people from the shop, you should go there, they are in the back. And he says, yes, okay, thank you, but I was hearing you were speaking about Proust. And we say, yes. It's funny because I'm flower, I sell flowers, and I make cattleyas. Cattleyas are the orchids, which are in the books. In the book, they are very important in the book from Proust. And you know, the young man comes to deliver something, but he sells flowers, and he makes those cattleyas. It's incredible. It's such a, you know, because it means that Proust is everywhere. So the person I was filming says, I think you should write a book about this, about the idea that Proust is everywhere. Even the people who have not read Proust, you know, they know something about Proust, they have an idea. And so he proposed to me to write a book. And of course the point of the starting point was all the people I had filmed, who all come with stories of their own relationship to Proust, and my idea was also to show that Proust is not such a big mountain that you have to climb up from the bottom to the top, you know, that you can pick up, you know, sentences wherever, enter through many different doors. But I didn't want to write the book alone. And it was a big publisher, I must say, Grasset, it's a big publishing. I have the book? No, I haven't the book here. And so I didn't want to write the book alone. And I said, I asked to the publisher, I asked a friend of mine who is a real writer if he wanted to write with me. So we write two persons, but different texts. You know, it's like I write a text and I send him, and he writes another text, and always Proust through the lines everywhere. And we wrote some short stories, I would say. I wrote short stories with the material of the people I have met, but I made just like Proust. You know, Proust, in order to build one of his characters, a duchess, for instance, he used many different duchesses. He mixed them, and from the real life. And so I made the same with my book. I mixed many readers to write some stories. And so in this book, it's well, you know, the book is just how to come closer to Proust and not thinking it's impossible, it's a monument. No, it's not a monument. It's just a writer that talks about us and is very close to us. This work is really the center of my life in the sense that it feeds me. And I think I'm very lucky. And it's a luck I wish to everyone, to have really like a work you are doing, a passion actually, a passion. But it's not a passion in a sense that passionate love, you know, that fire. It's on the contrary, it is something that, you know, it builds you up slowly, but really firmly. And it helps you from getting lost, because life is so vast. Especially when you are an artist, you can go and get lost. But this work really saves me because it gives me limits. It gives me limits, strengths, and so I wish to everyone just something, that is personal to you, then explore it and go further as much as you can.
Old men of my village, there they stood, day in, day out, with peaked caps and clay pipes, fishing from the old pond for eels, while wishing a fat trout. Old men of my village, there they once blazed, pillars of wisdom strong, upon their bold bridges telling tales over and long. Old men of my village, many waters crossed, many lands covered, none seems so wise or lost as that where moss gathers. Old men of my village. I was earning a living. At 8 years old, I was darning all the coal miners' socks because an old woman taught me how to darn. So I managed to have 6 pence a week. The second thing I did was to run messages for Catholics who ate fish on a Friday. So I had to walk 2 miles to the fish shop and 2 miles back to get another 6 pence. Another thing was to go to an old man who I could chop up sticks for the fireplace because we had no heating at all in the house and no water in the house. There was a tap outside and the toilet was down the bottom of the garden in a shed and you had to empty it every so often.
You make me sick, you are so bourgeois.
Anyway, I did become bourgeois and because I married an aristocrat bourgeois, and I must say that I found no difference at all between the two lives. I do not believe in the what they call the what is it? The Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He says the enfant, the sauvage, the good sauvage. I don't believe in the good sauvage, that the poor people are any better than the rich or the rich are any better than the poor.
Yeah, that's idealization. Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I lived both lives, and it's really quite. Well, of course, you like to be comfortable. You like to have. You don't. When you've been very poor, you don't really want to go back to be very poor.
Yeah, and about bourgeois, I write it. I mean the spelling I use in French is bourg from the verb bourrer, joie like joy. So bourg dash joie. But it's slightly impolite.
Like being drunk.
You know what it means?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It means fuck joy. Fuck joy. Oh. The bourgeois, I call them the fuck joy. I'm not talking about you, of course. But
I hope not.
I'd like to refer to a friend of mine, an Irish person, Maurice Harman, and I translated. One of his collections, beautiful collections, written in small 3-line poems, a bit like a haiku, and it's a comparison between the North American Indians and the Celts of Ireland. It's beautiful, in the form of poems, very short poems, And he has this short poem entitled "The White Bird," and I don't know it by heart, but the idea is the white bird.
I've got a song called White Bird.
Immaculately white, okay? And he crosses a marsh with high, dangerous weeds full of what do you call them? Thorns, and the water is dirty, and he crosses that, and when he comes out of the marsh, remains immaculately white. And I think the symbol is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you may be in terrible surroundings and remain true to yourself.
Well, I'm telling you, he must be Welsh.
You know what I mean?
There's a
so you may have lived with bourgeois, but you are not a bourgeois at heart, and you will never be.
Look, a daring peer, the gentle dove. So it's the white bird. You see, so it's a daring peer araden las, bydd I mi'n wast I broda, o brysio at y ferch, lle rhaim serch yn gydyna. Dos ti at I gwed ti wrthi, mod i'n wyl o'r dŵr yn heli, mod i'n I rad am ei gwelad, ac o'i chariad yn ffeiriaeth cherddad, o diw mor haiar hardd ei llun, am boeni dyn mor galad.
To your question about the life of the art before it finds an audience, and I'm not a Roland Barthes expert, but I find his ideas very intriguing about the independent life of a text, the death of the author, and the independent life of a text. But what you say is absolutely true. I remember as a teenager struggling with a passage in Ken Kesey, who it was a Tom Wolfe book about Ken Kesey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and who was the leader of this band called the Merry Pranksters in Southern California in the early 1960s. It's kind of the bridge movement between the beats between Kerouac's Clan and the psychedelic and Timothy Leary of the mid and late 1960s in California. And in fact, some of the kind of the dramatis personae actually carried over. So Neil Cassidy, the famous wingmate of Jack Kerouac and On the Road, was the driver for this bus called the Bus of the Merry Pranksters, which had the word further on the front of the bus. And so the book is called The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. And so my mom, all I'll say about my mom is she was in college between 1967 and 1971, which is all you have to know really about like how I was brought up. And so as Ken Kesey and his Merry Pranksters were in this bus going around the country, they're doing these sort of spontaneous works of art, these performance art and painting sides of bridges and doing improvised plays and in cul-de-sacs in the middle of New Mexico.
Happenings.
Yeah, the happenings. Yeah. And they would do these great paintings and murals on paper, and then the next morning they would tear it down. And as they would drive off, and someone would be upset, and Kesey would say, "Remember, art is not eternal, my friends." When I read that, I was 17, and I said, that's ridiculous. Of course art is eternal. Of course. What is not eternal if art is not eternal? And it took me years and years and years of turning that over in my head before I reconciled myself to the idea that art, the impulse to make art is eternal, but the work of art itself is not eternal. The work of art, the painting on the wall, is not what really matters.
Yeah.
Right? What matters is that never-ending urge, that Walt Whitman urge, the never-ending urge of the universe to make something that didn't exist before. And if what you make, if that book that you write never is read by a single soul, tant pis,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You've brought something in the
My
universe.
idea of not wanting to be published or be on anybody's lips, it doesn't interest me.
Oh, you're on everyone's lips.
What interests me is
To
me.
Paris.
Huh?
You're on everyone's lips in Paris.
Flattering. I love it. Tell me more.
Tell me more.
I'm eating it all up.
You can tell she runs away from it. She's happy being the reclusive artist until the moment when everyone is at her door, beating down her door.
It's to come.
No, it's happening. It's right now.
Well, let's feed this
Yes.
Okay.
very skinny
That was
man.
absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
But he's coming back in July, I hope.
Yeah, it's end of July.
With René, he's bringing his drums, and I'm keeping Adele's piano.
Oh, good.
well, play some. We'll play a little music.
Yeah. I really
Well, you know, do it.
You know, yeah, I thought when you said a piano, I literally imagined you pushing.
Wheeling, yeah.